everybody. Looks like a couple more people are trickling in. We'll go ahead and get started with today's webinar. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you all for joining us for today's webinar, RFP, the Connections Project, Expanding Employment and Economic Opportunity for Homeless Job Seekers. We've got some great information to share with you guys. We're excited to hear some of your questions and feedback, so we'll jump right into it. One of the first things I'd like to do is to give a name to some of the voices you're about to hear from and introduce myself and my fellow speakers today. So on your screen, introducing from screen left to right, for today's webinar, I'm lucky to be joined by my boss and director of the National Initiatives team, Heartland Alliance, Melissa Young. Pictured center is myself. My name is Carl Wiley, and I'm the coordinator for the National Center on Employment and Homelessness, NCEH, as well as the Connections Project, which we'll talk about pretty thoroughly today. And additionally, pictured to our right, we're fortunate today to be joined by Rebecca Allen, who's the program officer for Melville Charitable Trust. Melville Charitable Trust is one of the gracious supporters of the Connections Project and also behind some really, truly remarkable projects towards moving folks out of homelessness. So we're very glad to have Rebecca here today. Thank you, Rebecca. So I think let's jump right into it. We're going to go over a brief overview of what we'll aim to cover today. We'll start with introducing the full array of initiatives supported by the National Initiatives on Poverty and Economic Opportunity. Then we'll talk a little bit about the Working to End Homelessness Initiative, specifically what it is and how it's rooted with the Connections Project. We will then move to introducing the program I currently coordinate, the National Center on Employment and Homelessness. Following that, we'll dive into the main aspects of this webinar. We'll discuss the Connections Project, why the Connections Project is necessary as a necessary step moving people out of homelessness, and specifically we'll take a deeper dive into the Connections Project, how to apply the information packet, completing the letter of intent, and some of the issues or some of the things to complete on the back end with the final RFP. So we'll then take a very brief look at the Working to End Homelessness Innovation Workshop and what finalists can expect from that event. And then we'll move on to discussing innovation and specifically what we're looking for in our LOIs. And then finally, we'll try and touch on, if we've got some time, just frequently asked questions and specifically your questions for people who are viewing today. We've had a lot of folks submit questions prior to the webinar, and also we'll take questions towards the end. So I think we'll be able to get to most of those. First up, just a bit of webinar housekeeping. I imagine a lot of us have been in webinars, quite a bit, so we'll stick to a pretty standard webinar frame. All attendees are muted for this presentation. If you can't hear us, if there are image issues, if you have questions or need clarification, please send them through the question box to the right again. I'll let you all know now that a video recording as well as slides will be posted after the presentation. We're looking to have these materials on the Connections Project website in about a week, hopefully less than that. We're also going to be creating an FAQ and posting that on the website based on all the questions submitted previously and today. But I think that's everything. So again, let us know if you need anything, raise your hand. It's another function on the right, and let's jump right into it. We're going to open with a bit of background information on the Melville Charitable Trust. Melville is absolutely vital to the Connections Project, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing today, nor see some of the potential innovations we've got coming down the pipe. So we're going to hear from Rebecca Allen, who's the program officer of Melville. She's going to walk us through who Melville is, what their work centers on, and so I'll turn things over to Rebecca.
Hi, good afternoon. We are very excited about this launch of the Connections Project and proud to be a supporter along with the Oak Foundation and in partnership with the Butler Family Fund. The Melville Trust is a national foundation focused exclusively on supporting solutions to prevent and end homelessness. We concentrate on solutions within three interrelated areas: housing, health and support, and income, because it is most often problems within those three areas that lead to homelessness in the first place. And within each of these areas, we look to support efforts that will fundamentally change the way that people, organizations, and networks do business. This means efforts that support collaboration and risk-taking across agencies, and that support the adoption of more effective policies and practices that result in better outcomes in the lives of real people. Second slide. Our primary focus within our income program area is strengthening employment outcomes for people who are experiencing homelessness or most at risk of becoming homeless. It's about better access to jobs, skill building, work experience, and income growth. It's about leveling the playing field so that everybody has a shot at a decent paying job despite the odds stacked against them. and it's about dignity and the self-respect that comes from setting your own course. The Connections Project is all of these things. It promises to fuel new approaches to weaving strong and sustainable connections, demonstrate what works, and show how we really can create opportunity. We are thrilled that all of you are participating in this webinar. And now I'll turn it back to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Rebecca. What we're going to do now is we're going to shift over, and I'll turn it over to Melissa, who's going to walk us through the national initiatives overview.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on the webinar today. Like Carl said, my name is Melissa Young, and I direct Heartland Alliance's national initiatives on poverty and economic opportunity. For a little bit of background, Heartland Alliance is a 125-plus year-old human rights-based service organization that focuses on serving over 1 million people a year through jobs, justice, housing, and healthcare. At Heartland Alliance, the National Initiatives on Poverty and Economic Opportunity is housed within our Research and Policy Division. And currently, we run 3 national initiatives focused on ending chronic unemployment and poverty. Our 3 national initiatives include the National Transitional Jobs Network, aimed at advancing transitional jobs as a workforce solution for individuals with barriers to employment. Our Be More initiative focused on the disproportionality of unemployment and underemployment among men and youth of color. And then finally, the national initiative that we will be talking most about today is the National Center on Employment and Homelessness. We want to give you all a little bit of background on where the National Center on Employment and Homelessness came from and where we've been and how the work that we've done has influenced the Connections Project and the work that we'll do moving forward. In 2011, we got around the table and launched the Working to End Homelessness initiative. Our Working to End Homelessness initiative was funded by the Butler Family Fund, and with a goal of highlighting the role of employment as a solution in addressing homelessness. To meet that goal, we gathered around the table workforce professionals from a variety of sectors. We gathered their ideas about best and promising practices and heard from them about their challenges to meeting the employment needs of homeless job seekers in their community. We identified through their work promising and best practices to serving homeless job seekers, and we worked with them to also identify systems and policy challenges to doing their work. As a result of that effort, we built several best practice and promising practice briefs and have been crisscrossing the country ever since to disseminate that knowledge and information to communities. But our efforts through the Working to End Homelessness initiative really reiterated several things. The first is that something that all of you know is that most people experiencing homelessness want to work. There is a growing awareness around increasing employment and economic opportunity among homeless job seekers, and more broadly around individuals with barriers to employment and those who face chronic unemployment in communities. But we also know, as we've learned from all of you over the course of several years, that despite great need, really not enough communities have taken steps to orient and strengthen workforce and homeless systems, which really brings us to today and really brings us to the Connections Project, which we'll dig in more to this afternoon. The National Center on Employment and Homelessness grew out of all of this work. We seek to ensure that everyone who wants to work, regardless of the barriers that they face, has the support and opportunities needed to reach that goal. Through NCEH, over the next several years, we will promote employment as an element of preventing and ending homelessness. We will identify and advance with all of you evidence-based employment interventions, and identify and advance with all of you systems change solutions to ensuring that more homeless job seekers have access to employment and earned income to meet their needs.
That's great. Well, thank you very much, Melissa. I think that really sets a great framework for what we're going to talk about today with the Connections Project and what we've got moving forward. But first, let's flush out the Connections Project. What are our ideas behind it? What comes along with it? And where we plan to go? Just a reminder to folks that most of the information that we'll cover today can be found in the information packet, which is on the Connections Project website online. Feel free to use this as your go-to document, and it'll help you kind of go through what we've got today. But really, the spirit of behind the Connections Project is to lift up innovations and create systems change to benefit the needs of homeless job seekers. But let's get specific. What do we really mean? In order to foster needle-moving change, we have to commit to values that foster innovation, risk-taking, and continuous learning along the way. Communities can be, and often are, centers of innovation that address challenges to complex problems. We test solutions, assumptions, and problems that we come across in our daily work and generate lessons to inform future innovation and replication. Communities are on the front line of addressing homelessness and chronic unemployment. They naturally see what's happening on the ground. Communities can drive national policy by demonstrating what works and documenting challenges along in real time. So the Connections Project is the flagship effort of the National Center of Employment and Homelessness. It's a 3-year place-based systems-level collaboration and capacity-building invitation to communities nationwide. The goal of the Connections Project is to increase employment and economic opportunity for homeless job seekers through system change. Ultimately, our aim is to seed and spur on new ideas and stronger connections among homeless and workforce systems to better connect homeless job seekers to employment and greater economic opportunity. So what I've outlined here on this slide, it kind of has our RFP schedule below. Some of you might be familiar with this. It's on the cover of the information packet. But the Connections Project request for proposals aims to identify through a multi-phase competitive process up to 5 Connections Project sites that will plan, implement, and strengthen innovative system collaboration ideas in order to meet the goals of increasing employment and economic opportunity. So I've included that schedule there for you. Again, it's on the cover, and we'll walk through some of the bigger due dates and talk a bit more about what we're looking for in the upcoming slides. We're going to touch a little bit about site supports that are offered through the Connections Project RFP. Connections Project site lead applicants may be awarded up to $125,000 per Connections Project award site over the full project period to be used towards whatever their innovative idea is. We'll mention here and elaborate more on the next slide, but this funding is also contingent upon sites maintaining full participation with NCEH. And there are several other site supports we're going to outline as well, but that connection with us is really important moving forward. So the first point we've got there is technical assistance. This is also offered along with the direct award funding. With that technical assistance, you get a dedicated NCEH staff, which works on providing, documenting, and coordinating technical assistance to Connections Project sites in order to support that planning and implementation of their proposed ideas. So basically, you get to see and hear from our bright, shining faces who can possibly put a price tag on all of that. We'll also work together on continual assessment of site needs and analysis of progress towards goals and help create benchmarks that make sense for your project. Really, that's the nature of innovation. For us to try and define that now would be too early, but based on your ideas, we can help create some way to measure that. What we'll also do, support will be provided through remote and in-person assistance, trainings, on-site meeting facilitation, site visits, document review, research, sharing resources, and other means necessary to supporting your site goals. Point number 2, intensive peer learning is also offered through this ongoing project. As part of the Connections Project, you'll have access to expense-paid cross-site convenings aimed at addressing common challenges and opportunities, as well as connections to national partners. Connections Project teams will connect through periodic peer learning meetings, webinars, and conference calls, as well as potential site visits to inform progress towards their goals. So we're really going to try and get people connected together in various different ways. We're also going to offer practical tools and resources as part of the Connections Project for finalists. We offer access to the National Initiatives on Poverty and Economic Opportunities library of practical resources focused on serving the employment needs of homeless job seekers and specific populations with barriers to employment, as well as other on-site and site-specific resources. But finally, and expanding on the previous point, for select Connection Project finalists, there's also sponsored travel, lodging, and expenses for up to 2 members of award sites to participate in one relevant local, state, or national conference per year. So that all comes with the supports for the Connections Project. What we'll jump now to are the responsibilities for Connection Project sites. So we've outlined what funds and other supports are awarded as part of the Connections Project, but now we're going to move into talking about what responsibilities are tied to that. So first off, Connection project sites will be asked to identify a project captain. Ideally, the project captain would be a staff member of the lead applicant entity, but also we can be flexible on this. If other agreements make more sense for your project, again, we'll work with you on that. But your innovative ideas may very well vary, so we'll try and work with you on this. They're going to vary is what we expect. Project captains are also expected to participate in technical assistance, peer learning, coaching, training, other resources. Again, we talked about sharing the knowledge of everybody else, so project captains might be the lead on that, bringing your knowledge from your site to other folks around the country. Outside of project captains, your team will also create named partners to connect with for your project. We have a hunch that the best and most innovative connections for your idea will come from applicants that blend the know-how of multiple partners. This could be government, quasi-governmental systems, advocates, philanthropy, employers, homeless job seekers, for-profit entities, an array of likely and unlikely champions as well. So additionally, we're going to be asking connection project sites to engage in relaying information, relevant information over the course of the project period and meeting other specified goals as we move forward. More specifically on this, we may be asking sites to produce or share baseline data to help us kind of chart our course as we move forward. We're going to talk a little bit now. We spent some time talking about our values and some of the specifics of what Connection Project is. But let's take a moment to carve out time to talk about some things that you should avoid maybe when building your innovative idea. We've outlined on the slide, you can see in front of you, a few areas in which we would consider not funding, specifically co-location of staff services, cross-training of staff in multiple systems, and participation between and among other partner systems. I want to address some concerns that might have popped up just now. Each of these system collaboration efforts does show promise in increasing employment and earnings for homeless job seekers. We highly value these collaborative ideas and firmly believe that they should be spread across the country nationwide. The aim of the Connection Project, however, is to innovate beyond these types of system innovations. So we aim to identify and select project awards to Connection Project sites that seek to experiment and challenge the state of their local systems. We want to see novel approaches. We really want to see collaborative ideas that take risks and improve upon ideas and inventive partnerships that you all may know in your practice abroad. Connections projects will not fund proposals that focus on implementation, scaling, or replication of specific employment programs, service delivery programs, strategies, or program operations. The Connections project will also not make award funds available directly to private for-profit entities or for capital campaigns. That's just something to keep in mind as you plan out your ideas. So let's talk a little bit about the Connections project, the essence of great ideas. What we're looking for are bold, fresh, creative ideas. With that, no ideas too big or too small, too specific, too untested, too radical. Really, we want people to kind of push the envelope on this. We're looking to select projects that will foster system change that translates into improved employment outcomes for homeless job seekers. Ultimately, we're looking for these qualities to be reflected, the below qualities I'm about to list for you all, in your proposed Connections project site ideas. For one, the ability to demonstrate and articulate a clear understanding of how your proposed idea will increase economic opportunity for your target group of homeless job seekers is very important. Secondly, proposed ideas that are bold and new and build on, improve, or modify existing evidence-based collaborations and innovation successes in your target geographic area. And all this information, too, can be found in the information packet. I know it's quite a bit to throw out there. Innovative ideas that Connection project sites believe can be sustained over time through integration into existing systems, something you can build into something else. Ideas that lend themselves towards adaptability and something we can potentially replicate across the nation if it is able to lend itself to that. The potential to leverage in-kind or direct financial support to bolster sustainability moving forward once the Connection project wraps up. And proposed ideas should be actionable in the time period allotted. We have 3 years to do this, and so hopefully these innovations can at least start to see those things and we can get some good data out of those 3 years. So let's talk a bit more about the goals. And I think we're going to transition over to Melissa to talk about the goals of the Connections project.
Hey, everybody. So we know just as well as you guys that goals matter. They matter in all of our work, and setting our benchmarks and goals really drive all of our work. One thing that we learned over the course of the work that we've done is that, really three broad, high-level groups of goals are really important in making a positive difference in the lives of homeless job seekers. The first is access. The second is employment, and the third is income. Now, we know as well as you guys that these goals are intertwined, and they often are interrelated and end up reinforcing each other. So, for example, efforts to increase access to public systems that may be offering employment services, such as your public workforce system, will, we hope, over time have a positive effect on the likelihood that homeless job seekers get and keep employment. But we know that we need to set our sights around these three access points in terms of goals. What we're asking from all of you is to identify through your letter of intent and in the final proposal section of your project which two out of these three broad goals will be touchstones for your project. Ultimately, we will be asking you to use these as a touchstone over the course of the 3-year project period. We recognize that these touchstones will help guide your work both in your ideas that you propose, but also in your theories of change, in your work plans moving forward. One thing to keep in mind is that if your Connections project site ideas aren't likely to result in more homeless job seekers getting or being enrolled in employment services by the end of the project period, your Connections project site systems innovation ideas are probably missing the mark. So keep that in mind as you're thinking about your solutions that you're proposing. And then I think we want to touch on really quickly who can apply for the Connections project. Building off of what Carl just said earlier, every Connections project site applicant team should have a lead applicant and named partners working on the Connections project site idea. We'll talk about named partners in a few minutes, but there is no required number of named partners for Connections project teams should have. We know that Connections project lead applicants ought to be a legal entity, validly existing, duly organized, and yes, in good standing under the laws of the United States. We encourage applicants from both rural and urban geographies, and during your letter of intent and your final proposal stages of the Connections project process, you'll identify the geographic reach of your Connections project idea. So let's talk really quickly about who your partners might be. We're not going to go through this laundry list of the grid that you see on the slide in front of you, but what's important for us, and hopefully the takeaway for you all, is that we see potential project partners as coming from a variety of different sectors, from a variety of different disciplines. And as Carl mentioned earlier, we're really looking for partnerships, and we have a hunch that the great ideas that come out of communities will blend the expertise and the know-how of multiple partners across these various systems and these various sectors. So, for example, we certainly see workforce and employment systems, both public and community-based systems, as being critical partners in an intervention and in an idea to increase employment access, employment and earnings for homeless job seekers. But we also see really important roles for advocates and researchers, and probably some policy wonks in your community. We see important roles potentially for the transportation sector, for the financial services sector, the faith-based community, and many, many others. Ultimately, your Connections project idea that you conceive in your community should be thoughtful about the target homeless job seeker population that you identify for your Connections project idea, and which systems need to be brought around the table to make a difference in the lives of homeless job seekers in your community. And now I'll turn it right back over to Carl.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa. And I'd like to say, too, that that table from the previous slide is also available on page 10 of your information packet if you'd like to learn more about partners and the like. So this graph here, we're going to talk a little bit about the request for proposals process. We outlined it a little bit earlier with dates, but I want to walk through what that actually means for us on the ground. let's see, applicants and partners that wish to become Connections Project sites will participate in the stages outlined above. Connections Project application information, question prompts, and required attachments can be found all on the Connections Project website. And I'll make sure all this information will be provided at the end of the presentation, so we won't lose you on that one. The first stage is coming up, so we'll focus on that a bit. Stage 1, submitting a letter of intent, which is due February 20th at 7 p.m. Central Time for us here. All communications and questions for that, for the Connections Project RFP, can be sent to me at nceh@heartlandalliance.org. Again, I'll present that at the end. We're also going to present a substantive questions, and all answers will be posted in the FAQ section on our website. So I'd like to bring everyone's attention to the colored box around stages 2 through 4. We've mentioned that the process, the Connections Project RFP process, is a multi-phase competitive process to select finalists. So these stages are for the Connections Project finalists only. So if you submitted a letter of intent and are not selected as a finalist, you'll need to complete, you won't need to complete any additional work. So I know submitting LOIs are not a necessarily easy thing, especially one that asks you to risk and challenge and stretch yourself towards an innovative idea. So we're very appreciative for all submissions, even if you're not selected. We've got a lot of questions so far about things related to questions stages 2 through 4 and how to complete them. But I'd like to make note that I'll be personally working with teams, the selected finalists, on all their questions and concerns, specifically with those stages. So we won't dig in too much on those, but folks who are working with us closely should have all of their questions and concerns addressed on those moving forward. But if you are selected as a Connections Project site finalist, you'll be asked to begin preparing for a 2-day Working to End Homelessness Innovation Workshop, which we're going to outline in the next upcoming slides. But that's stage 2 on your sheets ahead of you. Stage 3, finalists will submit a final proposal to us, and that'll be on May 15th of 2015 at 7 o'clock Central Time. And these really will be shaped by what we do at that Innovation Summit at stage 2. So, you know, people have a chance to kind of stretch and pull their ideas a bit at that workshop, and then we'll kind of get a really good final product out of that. Stage 4, selection of the Connections Project award sites. Connections Project award sites will be selected by a panel of reviewers and announced June 15th of 2015. Up to 5 Connection Project site teams will be selected and will work to implement their ideas over the 36-month period of this project, concluding in June of 2018. And that's a lot of information I know I just threw out there. Again, I'll put my information at the end, and if you have any specific questions, we'll try and answer them at the end, or you can email me directly. So we're going to flush out a little bit more on that stage 1, the letter of intent. We're going to cover that. I hope that some of you are considering completing this section, as you know, the innovations that we could potentially see are rooted in ideas that are existing out in, you know, across the nation. So if you have a hunch, if you have an idea, we encourage you to submit it. During stage 1, during this phase, Connection Project teams will have an opportunity to assemble and develop an initial concept and system collaboration idea. That's stage 1. Connection Project sites will have until February 20th, as outlined earlier, and it's also listed on your slide, to submit letters of intent to us here at the National Center on Employment and Homelessness. NCEH will go through and assess the letters of intent and select approximately 10 finalists to participate in that Working to End Homelessness workshop that we mentioned on the previous slide, and we'll mention actually upcoming. It is our hope that the process of developing Connection Project ideas, submitting letter of intent, and participating in the Working to End Homelessness Innovation Workshop, as well as the final proposal, will result in a greater number of lasting system collaborations with you all and with us. And that's kind of something that we can all take away from this project. I think that, you know, all of us can get something out of at least stage 1. So we're going to jump to stage 2, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that workshop. The Connection Project finalists will be announced by March 9th, and then they will be invited to participate in the 2-day Working to End Homelessness Innovation Workshop that will be held in D.C., Washington, D.C. And I have a little bit of more detail about that on the upcoming slide. So we will convene in D.C. at the Pew Charitable Trust. It'll also be co-hosted by the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, USICH. The goal of the Innovation Workshop is to provide a space for Connection Project finalists to have the opportunity to challenge their assumptions, to wrestle with new ideas, and to take advantage of new resources and tools, and even frameworks that strengthen their ultimate proposal. And how we're going to do that, we have a couple of different ways to tackle that. We're going to have coaches and spotlight sessions during our workshop. We're going to bring in people from all over the different sectors to participate and kind of pull people's ideas from different directions. Maybe someone from a tech background, someone from product development, really want to kind of make that field wide open to get the most ideas and people's ideas to pull in ways they might not have thought previously. We're also going to include federal agency partners will be there with us, and they'll kind of help to ground us into what we can do based on policy and what's existing in our current structure. So maybe they'll give us some new ways to poke holes and push the envelope forward. We'll also have some other supports for that workshop. Again, travel, accommodations, travel-related expenses will all be reimbursed to the finalist teams. Participating in the Work and End Homelessness workshop may result in Connection Project sites making modifications to their ideas, which is something that actually we welcome. We really want to see people stretch that idea and maybe come with something new. Folks are going to come up with an LOI that they feel is really innovative. They're going to bring it to the Connections workshop, but hopefully they're not married enough to that idea to see it change a bit while they're there and let some experts poke that with them. So we're going to jump to stage 3 now. Following the Work and End Homelessness Innovation Workshop, finalists will have until May 15th, 2015 at 7 o'clock Central to submit their final proposal to us here at NCEH. We also may interview Connections Project sites or conduct an on-site visit as part of our assessment process, just to kind of see what people are working with and to, if their idea is very innovative and it's something that we have to see in place, we might, come out there and see how it would implement. We encourage Connection Project finalist teams to finalize partnerships at this stage and to take all steps needed to prepare and coordinate their Connections Project teams in order to be ready if they're selected as a finalist for awards. And finally, we'll review the final RFPs and make a selection for the Connections Project Award sites. Connections Project Award sites will be selected by a panel of reviewers here and announced on June 15th, 2015. Up to 5 Connection Project teams will be selected and will work to implement their ideas over the full 36-month period, again concluding in June of 2018. And then a little final note at the bottom, Connection Project sites should be ready to begin working on their ideas as early as July of this year. So I know it's moving pretty quickly, but sometimes we just have to jump on these things when they show up. So what we're going to do now, I think that kind of really wraps up the bulk of what we're going to go through on our end for just going through the RFP. We're going to move into talking or just getting into the questions next. But first, I'd like to say that a video recording and slides are going to be available of today's webinar on the page. Again, an FAQ will also be posted there. And the deadline to submit questions to NCEH for these LOIs is noon on Friday the 13th of 2015. So if you have any questions, we'll start to take those. Again, there's that question box on the right. I think I do see some coming through. You can also, I have some instructions here. You can raise your hand and we can address your concerns specifically. Also, you can tweet your questions at us at TJ Programs, and also you can use the hashtag Connections Project. What I also want to do, I think we do have a lot of questions that we were submitted previously. We can jump to our frequently asked questions section because I think a lot of you might be asking some of those questions at folks. We have a lot of common questions, so I think it might make sense to jump to those first. We'll take a look at those, and then if we haven't covered anything, please let us know, and we'll jump to those. My apologies. We had a quick tech issue, but we are back. So let's get to those FAQs. Sorry to keep you guys waiting. Okay, and I think we actually do have some really good questions coming in. So I think we just started going over this first question just on technical assistance, and we'll take that question that someone just sent in. But the first question was, what types of technical assistance and peer learning opportunities will be offered if our project is selected as a winner? That is, can you give a specific example of technical assistance? So for that, there are a lot of things I think we outlined earlier that come in addition to direct award funding. You get us here at the center. We also work on providing, documenting, and coordinating technical assistance along the way. We'll work together on continual assessment of site needs and analysis of progress towards those goals. Again, those are defined by your project site. Support will also be provided through remote and in-person assistance, trainings, on-site meetings, site visits. We'll review some documents. And some folks might be familiar with our technical assistance in the past. We'll also bring that know-how with us as well. So I think we do have a really good question that came through. We're going to try and jump to that.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. This is Melissa Young. We had a great question come in, which I will quickly read and then attempt to answer. The question is that folks had anticipated response responding to the letter of intent, in part based on draft WIOA regs, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act regulations, which are now delayed. And the question is that since these regs are expected to be game-changing but won't be available prior to submission, what guidance do folks have around their application and organizing their proposals around new opportunities within the new workforce bill? This is a great question. I think I'll go back in part by saying that we envision that some of your Connections Project innovation systems change ideas may change over the course of the multi-phase and multi-month process. We think that if you've got a great idea that you believe fits into the direction and framework that the new WIOA bill presents, most specifically the opportunity to serve individuals with barriers to employment, absolutely go for it. Feel free to propose your wildest idea that may fit into the way that the bill is structured. We'd love to see that. Also, I think there are some opportunities within the legislation of WIOA that present opportunities to do innovative things in your state and community with the discretion at the state level. So again, feel free to propose your wildest ideas. Your ideas may change, may augment over the course of the project period. We know that those regulations are delayed, and they may be out this spring in time for folks who move through to the finalist stage of the Connections Project to submit a final proposal that may look different from the LOI. So hopefully that is helpful to folks.
Perfect. Thanks, Melissa. Really quickly, we're going to jump to a second frequently asked question regarding letters of intent. What are some examples of supplemental materials that we want to include with our application? That's a really good question. So I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact, in your LOIs, it does list, we would, to not attach more than 2 items of supplemental materials to bolster your idea. But really, we do want to keep that wide open for whatever folks are thinking would help them explain their idea to us. It could be charts, studies that back up their ideas, background information, again, where your idea came from, testimonials from folks who've used it previously or something that you're doing differently, research that, garnered your innovation. Really, honestly, anything. You can send us that. Just try and limit it to 2 so we can make sure to review them thoroughly. But I think that should be good. So, yeah, try and tack as much as you think would need for that. We'll jump to another one here. If we win, in quotation marks, will there be a chance for continued funding after the 3-year program period, or could we potentially receive assistance in obtaining such funding? So at this point, NCEH and the Connection Project cannot commit to continued funding after the 3-year project period. Specifically, just we've only been kind of committed to these 3 years. So as a result, we're looking for folks who can kind of have the potential to leverage in-kind or direct financial support to bolster them in the future after the end of the project. But also there are several connections and folks that I think that people will get to work with along the way that maybe be able to connect them to funders in the future or connect them to resources that might help them as well. Part of the Connections Project is making these connections. So I have a pretty good gut hunch that folks are going to get some good connections out of that, and maybe that'll bring that along as well. Looks like we have another really good question we want to jump to, so I'll turn it over to Melissa.
Another great question came in earlier in the presentation. It is, can we target populations, can the target population include formerly chronically homeless who are living in permanent supportive housing, or must populations be experiencing homelessness right now? I'll answer the first part of this question by reminding folks that in your letter of intent, we're asking folks to identify and define very specifically the target population of adults or youth homeless job seekers for your system innovation idea. We ask for that because we want to really get a clear picture of the target population that you have identified that is most in need in your community for employment opportunities and interventions, but also to sort of understand how your system innovation idea aligns with the population target that you've identified. Very specifically in this question, can the target population include chronically homeless who are living in permanent supportive housing? the answer to that is yes. You may target chronically homeless populations for your system innovation collaboration ideas. So back to Carl.
That's great. We've got a couple more FAQs from folks emailed in previously. So let's see. What expenses will be covered for the Working to End Homelessness Innovation Workshop? Plane tickets, meals. Are we required to stay in the same hotel as the rest of the conference? So like we mentioned earlier, travel, accommodations, travel-related expenses will all be reimbursed to finalist teams. If you're invited, we're going to cover that. We're also reserving a room block at the hotel, and we'll also cover those accommodations. So for folks, I think who are locally there, I don't think necessarily, if you've got your own space, that's where you can go. We're not going to require anyone to stay in the accommodations that we'll provide. So we just want to make sure we have those for folks who are maybe traveling in from the East or West Coast. We want to make sure that they have a place to go for that. Another question here: what experts or professionals will be at the conference? I wanted to stress earlier, I don't know if I covered all the types we're going to look for, but we're going to have coaches and federal partners at the conference, and their job is to really kind of poke and prod ideas and push your innovation to a new way. Of the coaches may consist of for-profit, nonprofit, employers, city, state, federal government, philanthropic partners, experts in the homeless field or employment field, income support specialists, reentry specialists, veteran services, folks who work in that field, but also things like communications, things like marketing, things like product development, web design, graphic design, other really unique and varying perspectives we want to get in there that we think are going to help people's ideas. We're going to try and invite them and get them there. Also, I would like to point out that if you happen to know someone that you think would be really good for this, please feel free to let us know. I've got my information at the end. We would love to take, just have, suggestions of folks we should invite. We do have a pretty good list going right now. We'd love to have any additional comments moving forward. We're also going to have federal partners. Federal agency representatives may come in from all over, potentially from the Department of Labor and other Health and Human Services, HUD. We're looking into that right now and gathering partners as we speak. So that's a very good question. I think, let's see, someone did ask, I think a couple of people just now asked, to clarify, $125,000 is over the course of 3 years, and how will the funding be dispersed? Yeah, to confirm that, select connection project sites may be awarded the $125,000 over the full project period. So that would be over those 3 years. Continued funding over the course of the year period is contingent upon, like we mentioned earlier, submitting data and kind of being connected with us and moving forward. That will be dispersed through Heartland Alliance. We'll be giving the award money directly to the connection project sites. So I think that answers that question there. I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa for another question we just received right now.
Great. We've had a couple of questions to this end. I just want to make sure we highlighting this, folks asked, can we restate the deadline for questions along with the email address? Sure. The deadline for submitting questions in writing to us about the RFP is Friday, February 13th at noon Central Time. We will gather all of the remaining questions at that point in time, put them in an FAQ, and post that on our website. The email address to ask questions is nceh@heartlandalliance.org. I also want to make sure I highlight one of the questions that Carl just responded to in terms of receiving resources throughout the project period. Connection sites, contingent money over the course of the 3 years is also dependent on folks proving that they're working on their innovation ideas and collaboration ideas over the course of the 3-year project period. So maintaining connections with all of us and working with our staff team and enthusiastically embracing all of the peer learning and connections opportunities over the course of the 3-year project period is really important in terms of continued funding over the course of the 3 years. And then finally, a question came in from a few folks on the line that I can just highlight or just answer very quickly. Folks asked, about what we mean by community. Is regional too large as a potential community? And as we highlight throughout the information packet in a couple of places, Applicants can come from regional, tribal, state, local, or municipal entities. Regional, from our perspective, is not too large, but again, we want to see through your letter of intent package that you send to us a clear understanding of the target population for your systems connection ideas and a clear connection between your ideas and the target population that you've identified. So just keep that in mind as you're thinking about geography to cover and to focus on with your system connection ideas. Carl, other questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump back to a frequently asked question. What if we anticipate that our connections project idea or other aspects of our project will change? For example, relationships, partnerships with philanthropists, elected officials, local conditions, etc. That's a really good question. This is, I anticipate that's totally okay. You know, this is a 3-year program. It's a very long trajectory, so things will change along the way. Again, I think we welcome that. We're going to work with teams to kind of personalize their benchmarks of what that looks like. We're going to try and brainstorm and figure out what we think the landscape will look like as we move forward, but also we're going to work with some flexibility as we do this. We understand ideas will change a little bit. And also to call back an earlier point, we did mention about adaptability in ideas. So keeping that in mind, you know, if your idea is able to flex and move over the course of the next couple of years, that would actually behoove it and potentially, you know, benefit it for your replication and using it moving forward. But I think it's a very good question. And I will jump. I think we've got actually a couple more here. Yeah. So another question folks asked: does our team name have to be final on the application? It doesn't. No. Folks who attend the workshop and who submit a final proposal on the back end down the road for those up to 10 selected sites, we'll work with them. Hopefully, they'll have a final name at that point. It will be required then. But up front with your LOI, just, you know, what you feel you should call your team. That sounds great to us.
And I've got a couple of good questions over here, Carl, that just came in. One of the questions is asking if during the LOI phase of the application, is it A, required, or B, recommended that applicants include letters of commitment from their project partners as attachments to their application? Great question. For folks that are selected as finalists in the phase of the Connections Project request for proposals process, in that final proposal, the answer is yes. You will be asked to demonstrate through letters of commitment or MOU agreements your partners. Certainly not all of your partners. What we're asking folks in the final stage of the process is that you get letters of commitment from the most important or the key partners to making your connections ideas successful and happen. Now, in the letter of intent phase, we're asking folks to identify and name their project partners and give us a brief sense of why each of these project partners are really key to making your Connections Project idea happen. That being said, we are not requiring through the letter of intent process that folks submit commitment letters from partners to us. Certainly, if you wish to, you are allowed up to 2 supplemental materials with your LOI, and you're certainly welcome to do that. But again, remember, you want to think about your supplemental materials very carefully and really make the strong case that your system innovation idea should be part of the finalist.
All right. We'll jump back into frequently asked questions. I believe we talked about geographic area previously. I think we jumped into that one. But I will jump the question towards the bottom of the slide. Can you give us a specific example of an innovative idea that you're looking for? I think that's what's on a lot of our minds. We've gotten that. I think it's the most questions we've received. And I want to reiterate back to what we were talking about. You know, we're looking for really bold, really fresh, really creative ideas. No ideas too big or too small or too specific. We really want something untested and something that really helps to translate into improved employment outcomes for homeless job seekers. That's our basis for that. But what I don't want to get into is to limit people as to what is a good idea or a bad idea. And I think I have a couple reasons for that. But I explained it earlier as a floor versus ceiling principle, right? So if we set out examples, people might limit their idea and hold back on what they might have gone for based on the examples we've provided. Basically give themselves a floor. They won't really test themselves. They'll stick to the floor. Or, based on our examples we put out there, they might strive for something that they can't actually reach based on their bandwidth of their program or a ceiling. So what we don't want to do is create these boundaries for people. We really want people to stretch outside of those and try something new. So I will say, as hard as it is to kind of not give a direct answer on that, we're going to hold back from putting out specific examples and let teams push themselves to what they think is really good. We will, yeah.
I'll just add there, just to add on to what Carl is saying, we want to make a big sustainable impact. Go big or go home. We are looking for you guys' ideas, and so really think outside of the box and bring them to us. So sorry, Carl.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think we're looking for us guiding people's ideas. We really don't want to limit that. So if you have the hunch, if you have an idea that you want to see, that's where the ideas should be coming from, not from, I think, on our end. We're also open to policy change suggestions, things that nudge the system a little bit, so that's something to consider. We're open to changing processes that are currently existing that we see in the field. How information is shared among systems is pretty vital. That could be an area people could explore. Various uses for technology, and anything else that teams can kind of dream up that support our goals of greater access, employment, earnings, and as well, overall just employment success for adults and youth homeless job seekers. I think that's what's grounding us. Other than that, really want to say sky's the limit and reach and push yourselves. In keeping with the spirit of the Connections Project, we will work with Connections Project sites to figure out the best way and the most appropriate way to measure their ideas. So you come up with the idea, and then on the end, those 10 finalists will work on measuring that down the road. But we don't want to limit innovation at this point. So hopefully that at least gets a little bit more. If you have any more questions on that specifically, please email us or let us know, and we'll try and work with you on that moving forward.
Great. A couple more questions. We have at least a couple of folks on the call who are shooting for the stars and asking us if they can submit more than one idea to the Connections Project proposal process. Certainly the answer is yes. We're not limiting the number of applications or letters of intent that can come from communities. Again, the goal is to identify and define the target group of homeless job seekers, either adults or youth, that you aim to serve, and really generate innovative systems collaboration solutions. So the answer is yes. Shoot for the stars.
Yeah, that's great. Any and all ideas, we welcome them. I think if we have more questions coming in, we can jump to those. We still have some frequently asked questions. I just haven't listed them on the slides. So I'll jump to more. Let's see. We had a couple more questions about supplemental materials. Again, I'll just reiterate that we are looking for. People are asking what to submit. I do want to say that really it's about anything you think will help your idea. Specifically for people who are really stretching themselves and trying something very new, I think it might behoove them to include something that kind of gives us a little bit of background on that, so we can ground ourselves and say, okay, this is a really great adaptation of that. Let's see. We have a question here that came through. The funds cannot be used to expand an existing program, correct? If we truly have innovative ways to expand an existing program. I think we did touch on that a bit earlier. But this funding is not necessarily used. We would not like to see it used for things that are already being done. We're really trying to push ourselves beyond that. So if you have an existing program that just needs additional funding, on our end, it's the innovation. We're really looking for the innovation and the innovative ideas. So on that aspect, I would say that the funding cannot be used for existing programs, as we've outlined both in this presentation and in the information packet, but also just really shoot for something innovative. That's what we're seeking for that.
Great. We've got a couple of more great questions coming in from all of you across the country. A couple of questions related to folks wondering if they can leverage the Connections Project process to advance specific policy changes in their local or state area. Certainly, policy change in your local or state area could be a viable a Connections project idea. Again, we are looking to make big impacts in communities. And if you in your community or state or area have identified that your target population would really benefit from a specific policy change, you know, and certainly you see the Connections project as being able to leverage the Connections project and the work together to manage that, certainly we're open to that. We had a couple of other questions around, is there a minimum number of people that ought to be served through the Connections project? And again, the answer to that is no. We want to remind folks that part of, again, the goals, as we talked about the goals of the Connections project, are really 3 high-level, broad groups of goals, including access to employment, employment itself, and earnings. But we recognize that achieving these groups of goals for communities is first really dictated by the target population that you're seeking to serve. We will work with all of you to identify the correct and the best benchmarks to achieving your goals over the course of the project period. So hopefully that helps answer the question there.
Yeah. We do have a quick technical question about submitting things through email. There was a question, do you want the application and LOI as a PDF? Yes, we would appreciate that. For further information on that, you can, we have instructions in the information packet, but if you could put that in a PDF for us, that would help. It helps us kind of print them and move them around and make them accessible. So a PDF would be good for that. We have another question. You know, if for folks who don't use Twitter, social media, Facebook, things like that, is there something that we should be including as part of our proposal? You know, and that's not necessarily absolutely required. We do have a section that we list that asks, you know, to condense your idea into something tweetable that we can share on our end to let folks know what people are working on in the field. But on your end, we do encourage you to use that, but also having social media presence is not a requirement of submitting an LOI. So just something to keep in mind. So we'll need something, when you do submit it, we'll need a hashtag or some sort of a 140 character tweet for us, but on your end, you don't have to use that as an ongoing thing. Just maybe something to fit in the box for us to use down the road. We can check to see if we've got any more questions coming through. I know we're also getting, it's about 2 o'clock now, so I want to be respectful of folks' time.
We just want to make sure that folks also know that your supplemental materials that you can submit with your letter of intent application are really, keep in mind, folks, that this is really about you helping to make the case for your idea and showing your roots and your prior work in this area, or your understanding of the problem and the solutions that you've identified. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about which supplemental materials you may want to include in your letters of intent. The other thing to keep in mind about social media is that we really see social media as an opportunity to really wrap our heads around your great ideas in a really succinct and sustainable form. So it's a way for us to be able to tell the world about the great ideas that all of you have in a really easy way. So keep that in mind. We're certainly not required to use social media, but we do ask within the letter of intent that folks think about 140-character tweet about what your idea is.
Another question we had submitted previously, what are the restrictions on how the funding is used? We've outlined this a bit in the information packet, and specifically this, the funds being used and an actual budget for these funds would be something that we would require of the 10 finalists after the workshop. So to get actually down to the weeds and give us those numbers is not necessarily something you'd have to do at this stage. But just keep in mind some of the things that we will not fund. The Connection Project will not fund proposals that focus on, again, implementation of existing programs, scaling of those programs, the replication of things that you are currently doing. But we're focused on system solutions and connections that also, help people access employment. We're going to work out those, the budgets and whatnot with finalist sites. So finalist sites should be prepared, for a cap and overhead and indirect expense for those 10 selected teams. We'll work with them directly on that too. So it's something to keep in mind, but we'll work with those teams directly on that.
Great. So we are rounding out our webinar time here in just a few minutes. We have had a lot of great questions over the course of the webinar period, and we really thank everybody for your attention and for your questions. They're really terrific, and all of the enthusiasm that we're hearing from communities across the country. We are probably not going to be able to get to all of the questions that folks submitted through the webinar, but please know that we will respond to your questions through the FAQ that will go live on our website. So all of the questions that you're proposing will be addressed, just so you know, and we will get to those. There has been a couple of questions that came in that we want to be sure to address because we do think that similar communities or communities across the country may have similar questions. One of the questions was, what role are we hoping that funders will play in the support of this project? Are they eligible applicants as well, especially as more and more are starting to develop programs that work in this area? That's a great question. The answer to that is, yes. We certainly see funders as being an eligible applicant or an eligible lead entity applicant for the Connections Project LOI. We also see philanthropy as being a really important partner in communities as you develop your ideas. We see philanthropy as playing several roles in communities. They may be a convener of individuals. They may help supplement the project award funds for projects. They may help, like we said, bring folks together or generate energy around the solutions. They may also be a space where you can bring questions and get sort of further guidance or further resources down the road to support the sustainability of your idea. One of the things that we mentioned earlier in the webinar was that we are looking for Connections Project sites ideas that are sustainable over time, either through integration with existing systems or other resources. And so we are certainly looking for philanthropy to be a partner when it's appropriate. Certainly, communities will not be judged on whether or not they have philanthropy at the table, but we certainly see them as a strong partner. And I think, any other key questions that are coming in? Oh, I think there's one other key question coming in that I have a feeling that folks across the country may have. The question is about a matching requirement within the Connections Project, either letter of intent or final proposal. The answer to that is no. There's not a matching requirement. We do want to remind folks that, again, we think philanthropy being at the table is a really important partner, and we will be, thinking about, as we read over your ideas, about sustainability of ideas, over time. But we also want to stress that we will be working with communities over the course of the 3 years to support the sustainability of your ideas over time. So it's certainly not all on you. We're all in this together. But there is no match requirement.
That's great. Well, I think we've definitely gone over a little bit of our time, but I want to make sure we've got those questions. Again, I'd like to thank you all for kind of bearing with us as we got through that tech issue there. But I'd also like to thank you for taking time out of your day to join us. I hope we made some things a little clearer for folks as they gear up and start writing their ideas. I want to say, having personally spent years working with clients and trying to navigate all the systems involved to help them along their way, I know it's personally extremely difficult to do so. So I want to point out that this is one of those rare opportunities that resources are being put into hands to test and try something new in our field. I know I speak for all of us here that I can say we're genuinely very excited to see what people come up with, and we look forward to those submissions. Our information is here on the screen. Also, if you register for this webinar, I'll make sure to get all this stuff to you. With that, I want to thank you all and have a great afternoon.